Welcome to your Week 6 micro lesson. This week's lesson is on reasoning and thinking errors. Inductive reasoning is a logical process in which conclusions are drawn from observation and the identification of a consistent pattern. So for example, if every time you eat a peanut your throat swells, then you can assume you are allergic to peanuts. Deductive reasoning is a logical process in which a conclusion is based on the premises generally assumed to be true. For example, all dolphins are mammals. All mammals have kidneys. Therefore, all dolphins have kidneys. A fallacy is an unsound argument that seems to be logical and is often persuasive because it appeals to emotions and prejudices. Inductive reasoning is often called bottom-up reasoning because it begins with observation. Observations lead to the identification of a pattern, which leads to a hypothesis, which then feeds into a theory. Conversely, deductive reasoning is often called top-down reasoning. It begins with a theory. What do we believe to be true already? Which leads to a hypothesis. Then we do an observation to check our hypothesis to see if our hypothesis is true. And then we either confirm or invalidate our hypothesis as a result of the observation. An empirical generalization is a type of inductive reasoning based on observation. An empirical generalization is when general conclusions are drawn about an entire group based on observing some members or examples of the group. So for example, one may conclude that the bonfire is hot and will burn them because they have touched the small flame of the candle. Empirical generalizing can lead to errors in thinking. One example is a hasty generalization. This occurs when the sample that support a conclusion are too small to provide adequate support. For example, when Johnny was small, he was bit by his neighbor's chihuahua. Now Johnny believes that all chihuahuas are vicious and want to attack him. A false dilemma, or an either-or fallacy, happens when a choice is presented between two extreme alternatives without considering additional opinions or options. For example, America, love it or leave it. Of course, there are many options that don't involve loving it or leaving it. A causal reasoning error occurs when an event is inaccurately claimed to be the result of another event. You might have heard it be said that correlation does not mean causation. In other words, just because something is related or occurs together does not mean that one causes the other. Here's an example. We know that more crime is committed during the summer months. We also know that more ice cream is consumed during the summer months. So can one conclude that ice cream causes crime? Of course not. There are 4 types of common causal fallacies. A questionable cause is presenting a causal relationship when no real evidence exists. Misidentification of a cause occurs when there is uncertainty about the cause, which makes it easy to misidentify it. Post hoc fallacy is a logical fallacy that states, since event Y followed event X, event Y must have been caused by event X. Here's an example. Our soccer team was losing until I bought my new shoes. We have not lost a game since I bought my new shoes. My shoes, my lucky shoes, must be causing us to win. Slippery slope occurs when we conclude that if we let X happen, then Z will eventually happen, so we cannot let X happen. Here's an example. If I let my daughter go to the movie with her girlfriends, she will eventually want to go to the movies with a boy. Therefore, I cannot let her go to the movies with her girlfriend. Fallacies of relevance are reasoning that leads to error in thinking. An example is an appeal to authority. During an appeal to authority, an argument is intended to persuade through the appeal of various authorities with legitimate expertise in the area in which they are advising. For example, because someone important said so. Appeal to fear, an argument in which the conclusion being suggested is supported by a reason invoking fear and not by a reason that provides evidence for the conclusion. For example, immigrants are going to take your job. Appeal to flattery, influencing the thinking of others by appealing to their vanity as a substitute for providing relevant evidence to support your point of view. For example, "You are so pretty, you should buy my product." Appeal to ignorance is an argument in which the person offering the conclusion calls upon his or her opponent to disprove the conclusion. If the opponent is unable to do so, then the conclusion is asserted to be true. In other words, if you can't prove me wrong, I must be right. Appeal to personal attack occurs when issues of the argument are ignored and the focus is instead directed to the personal qualities of the person making the argument. In other words, this person is a bad person, so his argument can't be correct. Appeal to tradition, a misguided way of reasoning that argues that a practice or way of thinking is better or right simply because it's older, traditional, or has always been done that way. A bandwagon is a fallacy that relies on the uncritical acceptance of others' opinions because everybody believes it. So for example, Kathy is opposed to social media because she would rather have face-to-face conversations. However, more and more of Kathy's friends have joined social media sites, so Kathy feels like she needs to have a site too. A red herring is a fallacy that's committed by introducing an irrelevant topic in order to divert attention from the original issue. Here's an example. When you get your phone bill and see that your teen has gone way over the limit, you try to talk with him. Instead of talking with you about the phone bill, he begins to talk with you about how hard his math class is and how well he did on the test today. Two wrongs make a right is a fallacy that attempts to justify a morally questionable action by arguing that it's in response to another wrong action, either real or imagined. For example, these two boys are fighting, and they may say to their parents, "He hit me first." To evaluate inductive arguments, one must ask themselves the following questions. Is the sample known, sufficient, and representative? Are my conclusions drawn from the evidence? Have I been influenced by a causal fallacy or a fallacy of relevance?